Empty shelves don't appear overnight. They happen silently, one missing item at a time. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss the warning signs until it's too late. Right now, there are 15 everyday grocery items quietly disappearing from stores, and most people won't notice until they're gone for good. In this video, I'm going to reveal exactly which grocery staples vanish first during supply chain disruptions, why they're so vulnerable, and most importantly, the subtle warning signs you need to watch for before the shelves go empty. Whether you're planning ahead or just want to protect your daily routine, understanding these patterns could make all the difference. Welcome to Food Decider, where we help you make smarter choices about what you eat and how you prepare. If you want to stay ahead of food trends, shortages, and industry changes, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss our insights. When most people imagine grocery shortages, they picture scenes from disaster movies, hordes of panicked shoppers, completely barren shelves, and chaos in the aisles. But that's not how shortages actually unfold in the real world. The reality is far quieter, far more subtle, and precisely because of that subtlety, far more dangerous. Real shortages don't announce themselves with drama. They creep in gradually. You walk into your usual grocery store and at first everything seems normal. But if you're paying attention, you'll notice small changes. The variety of brands you're used to seeing has shrunk. That organic milk you always buy, it's been replaced with an unfamiliar label. The cereal aisle that used to have 20 options now has 12. These aren't random occurrences. They're early warning signs that the complex systems keeping our grocery stores stocked are beginning to strain. The changes continue. Package sizes start shrinking while prices either stay the same or creep upward. You're paying the same amount for less product, but it happens so gradually that you might not notice until you're halfway through what used to last you 2 weeks. The quality of products begins to drop before they disappear entirely. Your favorite yogurt doesn't taste quite right. The bread seems to go stale faster than it used to. And then comes the most telling sign of all. You stop buying based on preference and start buying based on necessity. You're no longer choosing the brand you trust or the product you actually want. You're grabbing whatever is available because the alternative is going without. This gradual erosion of choice is actually more alarming than empty shelves because it signals something deeper. It tells us that the invisible infrastructure supporting our food supply, the transportation networks, the cold storage facilities, the labor force, the energy grid, is developing cracks, and those cracks tend to widen before they're ever repaired. For people who depend on routine, particularly older adults who've built their daily habits around specific foods and familiar brands, this disruption isn't just inconvenient. When the breakfast you've eaten for 30 years suddenly becomes unavailable, or when the medication you take requires being consumed with a specific food that's no longer on shelves, the impact cascades far beyond the grocery store. It shakes the foundation of independence, health management, and basic peace of mind. So what are the warning signs you should actually be watching for? First, pay attention when your choices start narrowing. If the cheese section usually has 15 varieties of cheddar and suddenly there are only 8, that's not a coincidence. Retailers don't reduce variety on a whim. They do it when supply chains can't support the full range anymore. Second, watch for shrinking package sizes. This practice, often called shrinkflation, allows manufacturers to maintain price points while offsetting rising costs. When you see it happening across multiple categories simultaneously, it indicates widespread pressure on production and distribution systems. Third, notice when product quality declines. Ingredients change, formulations shift, things don't taste quite the same as they used to. This often precedes availability issues because manufacturers are substituting harder to source ingredients or cutting corners to maintain production volume. And fourth, observe your own shopping behavior. If you find yourself visiting multiple stores to complete your grocery list, or if you're constantly making substitutions because your preferred items are out of stock, you're experiencing the early stages of a shortage, even if the shelves don't look completely empty. Understanding these patterns matters because they give you time to adapt before situations become critical. You're not waiting until there's a crisis to react. You're reading the subtle signals and adjusting accordingly. Now let's talk about the specific items that disappear first and why they're so vulnerable. We'll start with the products that are most dependent on electricity and refrigeration, because these are always the first casualties when systems are stressed. Eggs are perhaps the most universally relied upon protein source in the modern diet. They're quick, versatile, affordable, and packed with nutrition. For many people, especially older adults managing their protein intake, eggs form the backbone of breakfast and provide accessible, easy-to-prepare nutrition throughout the day. But eggs are fragile in every sense of the word. They're physically delicate, they require careful temperature control throughout their entire journey from farm to table, and the systems that produce them are remarkably vulnerable to disruption. A single outbreak of avian flu can devastate flocks and send prices soaring within days. Rising feed costs translate directly into higher egg prices or reduced availability. Transportation delays.
Any hiccup in this delicate chain creates immediate impact. And here's what makes eggs particularly telling as a shortage indicator. They trigger panic buying faster than almost any other item. The moment people see purchase limits on eggs or notice empty spots where cartons used to be, they recognize something is wrong. Eggs aren't a luxury item you can easily substitute. When they start disappearing, it's a clear signal that the food supply chain is under acute stress and that consumer confidence is beginning to crack. Butter represents another cornerstone of daily routine for millions of households. It's not exotic or complicated. It's the familiar spread on morning toast, the fat that makes vegetables palatable, the ingredient that turns simple meals into comfort food. Its very ordinariness makes its absence deeply unsettling. But butter's apparent simplicity masks hidden fragility. It depends entirely on stable dairy supply lines, consistent access to cold storage, and uninterrupted transportation networks. Even brief interruptions in power or transport can devastate availability because butter cannot withstand temperature fluctuations. When cold storage systems fail, butter is among the first products retailers must pull from shelves to prevent spoilage and food safety issues. The shortage doesn't announce itself dramatically. Instead, you notice that the 1-pound packages have become 3/4-pound packages. Your favorite brand has been replaced by an unfamiliar one. The butter that used to be pale yellow now has a slightly different color and texture. These subtle changes signal that the cold chain, the backbone of all dairy and refrigerated products, is beginning to fracture. Fresh milk might be the single most electricity-dependent food item in your entire grocery store. From the moment it leaves the cow until the moment you pour it into your glass, milk requires constant refrigeration. Every phase of its journey, collection, processing, storage, transportation, and retail display, depends on refrigeration systems running without interruption. This makes fresh milk incredibly vulnerable. A power outage that lasts even a few hours can spoil entire inventories. Transportation delays that expose milk to warm temperatures make it unsellable. Equipment failures at processing plants create immediate shortages. For people over 50, many of whom depend on milk for calcium and bone health, losing access to reliable fresh milk isn't just dietary, it affects long-term health management. This vulnerability is why shelf-stable UHT milk becomes such an important indicator. Ultra-high temperature processed milk doesn't require refrigeration until it's opened, which makes it vastly more resilient to supply chain disruptions. When you start noticing that grocery stores are prominently featuring UHT milk, or when the UHT section that used to be a small corner suddenly takes up significant shelf space, pay attention. It means retailers are preparing for fresh milk instability. And if the UHT milk itself starts running low, that's an even more serious warning sign. Soft cheeses, cream cheese, fresh mozzarella, brie, ricotta are favorites precisely because of their texture and digestibility. They're gentler on aging digestive systems and easier to incorporate into simple meals. But this category of cheese is ultra-sensitive to any disruption in cold chain management. When power outages occur, when transportation systems slow down, when cold storage facilities experience even minor temperature control issues, soft cheeses are the first products retailers remove from shelves. It's not that hard cheeses are immune to these problems, but they have much longer shelf lives and can tolerate brief temperature variations. Soft cheeses cannot. They spoil quickly, they pose food safety risks if mishandled, and they represent inventory that retailers can't afford to gamble with during uncertain conditions. So when you walk into your grocery store and the cheese section looks reasonably full, but your weekly soft cheese is consistently missing, don't assume it's a coincidence or a stocking error. It's a sign that the invisible systems keeping fresh food fresh are operating under strain, and retailers are making risk management decisions that prioritize stability over variety. Ground beef occupies a unique position in American diets. It's affordable, versatile, quick to prepare, and familiar. For many households, it's the foundation of weeknight dinners, the protein that turns pasta, rice, or vegetables into a complete meal with minimal effort. But ground beef's popularity makes it highly vulnerable during times of stress. The entire production chain, slaughtering operations, processing facilities, packaging lines, cold storage, and transportation depends on consistent labor availability, reliable energy supplies, and functioning logistics networks. When any of these elements face pressure, ground beef availability fluctuates dramatically. What happens during disruptions is that suppliers begin reallocating their limited stock to larger, more stable contracts. Schools, hospitals, restaurant chains, these institutional buyers get priority because they represent guaranteed volume and payment. Retail grocery stores, especially smaller independent ones, find themselves squeezed. You start seeing purchase limits. The quality declines as suppliers substitute lower grades to maintain volume. Prices creep steadily upward, and suddenly completing your weekly shopping requires visiting multiple stores just to find enough ground beef for your family. When ground beef, a routine cornerstone of home cooking, shows this kind of instability, it reflects deeper problems with labor availability and cost pressures throughout the meat processing industry. Prepared chicken and frozen chicken products represent the ultimate convenience.
You pull them from the freezer, heat them up, and have a complete meal with minimal effort. For older adults managing limited mobility or energy, for people recovering from illness, for anyone who needs reliable nutrition without complex preparation, these products are genuine lifelines. But that convenience comes at a cost: total dependence on systems that cannot afford to fail. Prepared and frozen chicken require continuous electricity from production through retail. They need extensive cold storage capacity. They depend on a steady stream of skilled labor for processing and packaging. Disrupt any single element of this chain and availability collapses immediately. The warning signs appear quickly: fewer brand choices, higher prices, earlier sellouts in the week, retailers limiting purchases. And during actual power disruptions, even brief ones, these sections of the freezer case empty completely as stores pull potentially compromised inventory. For the populations that depend most heavily on these convenient proteins, losing access doesn't just mean changing dinner plans. It means losing a daily nutrition safety net that may be difficult or impossible to replace with alternatives that require more preparation, more cooking skill, or more physical capability. Convenient frozen foods, complete frozen dinners, ready-to-heat meals, prepared entrees face the same fundamental vulnerability, but with even less margin for error. These products are entirely dependent on uninterrupted freezing from the moment they leave the production facility until the moment you place them in your home freezer. They have zero buffer. A power outage lasting a few hours means the entire inventory is potentially compromised. Even if the food technically remains safe to eat, retailers cannot legally sell products that have experienced temperature excursions without proper documentation and testing. So after storms, after grid failures, after any event that interrupts power to cold storage, these freezer sections empty out immediately. Watch what happens in your local stores after severe weather or infrastructure disruptions. The speed at which frozen food sections are cleared and how long they take to restock tells you everything about the resilience of local power systems and supply chain backup capacity. Pre-cut vegetables and prepared fruit represent the modern preference for convenience over preparation time. Bagged salads, vegetable trays, fruit cups, pre-sliced melons, these products reduce physical effort and make healthy eating more accessible, which is particularly valuable for older adults or anyone with limited mobility or arthritis in their hands. But convenience here means extreme fragility. These items go through extensive processing: harvesting, washing, cutting, packaging, immediate chilling. Every step requires equipment, energy, and labor, and every step must happen quickly because once produce is cut, the clock starts ticking. Any delay from labor shortages, any interruption in electricity for washing and cooling equipment, any slowdown in transportation, and these products become unsellable within hours rather than days. When you see the prepared produce section running consistently low, or when bagged salads and cut fruit empty out faster than usual, you're witnessing proof that the system is under immediate stress. These products are the canaries in the coal mine for the entire fresh produce supply chain. Fresh bread and baked goods seem simple: flour, water, yeast, heat. But behind every loaf on the shelf lies a remarkably complex operation. Industrial bakeries require consistent supplies of flour, which depends on successful harvests and functioning grain distribution networks. They need yeast, which has its own vulnerable production chain. They require enormous amounts of energy to power ovens. They depend on skilled labor to manage production timing, and they operate on just-in-time delivery schedules because bread cannot wait. It must be baked and sold within a tight window. Any choke point in this system translates immediately into empty bakery shelves. Flour shortages slow production. Yeast supply issues halt it entirely. Power disruptions shut down ovens. Labor shortages mean batches don't get made. Transportation delays mean loaves don't reach stores before they're already stale. When the bakery section empties first and stays empty longest after disruptions, that's an unmistakable sign that multiple systems are failing simultaneously. Bread might seem like a basic commodity, but its reliable availability depends on everything working correctly all at once. Orange juice and cold-pressed juices occupy an important place in many people's nutrition routines, providing vitamin C, supporting immune function, and offering easily digestible nutrition that's particularly valued by people over 50 managing their health. But these products are remarkably fragile. Fresh juice requires temperature-controlled pressing, immediate refrigeration, cold storage throughout distribution, and refrigerated transportation to retail locations. The entire chain must maintain precise temperature ranges or the product spoils. After any logistics disruptions, storms, power failures, transportation delays, fresh and cold-pressed juices are among the first items pulled from shelves, while bottled water and whole fresh fruit remain available. The quiet disappearance of fresh juice after infrastructure disruptions flags immediate problems with cold chain systems. If juice is missing but fresh oranges are still available, it tells you that the processing and distribution systems are compromised, even though the base agricultural supply might be fine. Now let's shift our focus to pantry staples, the shelf-stable items that seem like they should be immune to the vulnerabilities affecting refrigerated foods, but turn out to have their own surprising.
Breakfast cereals and oats anchor the morning routine for millions of families. They're stable, easy to prepare, gentle on digestive systems, and familiar. For people seeking predictable, uncomplicated nutrition to start their day, these products are foundational. But cereal production depends on successful harvests of grains, uninterrupted processing and facilities that require significant energy inputs, packaging that depends on functioning supply chains for boxes and bags, and timely transportation from production facilities to distribution centers to retail stores. When any part of this chain experiences stress, instability shows through subtle changes rather than outright absence. Box sizes shrink, familiar brands disappear and are replaced by unfamiliar ones. Prices creep steadily upward without obvious justification. The variety that used to fill an entire aisle contracts to half an aisle. These aren't dramatic changes, which is precisely why they're easy to miss, but they signal that agricultural pressures, processing challenges, and supply chain strains are gradually tipping into the breakfast table. When you notice these patterns accelerating, when shrinkflation becomes obvious, when brand turnover increases, when prices jump noticeably, it indicates that the pressures are intensifying and may soon affect availability more directly. Cooking oils, vegetable oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, and olive oil are more than just cooking fats. They're concentrated sources of calories and essential fatty acids that make meal preparation possible. Nearly every cuisine and cooking method depends on having reliable access to affordable cooking oils. But oil production sits at the intersection of global agriculture, industrial processing, international trade, and complex logistics. The agricultural crops that produce oils depend on favorable weather, adequate water, functioning fertilizer supply chains, and stable growing conditions. Processing requires industrial facilities and significant energy inputs. Distribution moves oils across international borders through trade relationships that can shift rapidly. And transportation to retail requires functioning logistics networks. When drought hits major growing regions, when international conflicts disrupt trade routes, when trade restrictions are imposed, when energy costs spike, cooking oils are among the first products to show the strain. Bottles shrink from 48 ounces to 40 ounces to 32 ounces. Prices rise steadily. Premium brands disappear and are replaced with budget alternatives. Even the budget alternatives start seeing availability issues. Rising oil prices and reduced variety signal that global pressures, climate, geopolitics, economics, are reaching directly into local kitchens. These products serve as real-time indicators of conditions affecting agricultural systems worldwide. Canned proteins, tuna, salmon, canned chicken, canned meat, occupy a unique position in food security planning. They require no refrigeration, they have exceptional shelf life, they need minimal preparation, and they provide concentrated nutrition. These characteristics make them valuable for everyday convenience, but critical during disruptions. And that's exactly why they vanish so quickly when systems show stress. It's not that production has necessarily stopped or that supplies have actually dried up. It's that consumers recognize the strategic value of these products and engage in defensive shopping behavior. People stock up not because they need canned tuna for dinner tonight, but because they want the peace of mind of knowing they have protein sources that won't spoil if the power goes out, or if they can't get to the store for a while. When canned goods shelves start showing significant gaps, when purchase limits appear, when familiar brands become consistently unavailable, it's a reflection of declining trust in the system's resilience. People are voting with their wallets, indicating they believe disruptions are coming or are already here. Bottled water seems almost too obvious to mention until you recognize that its disappearance marks a fundamental boundary. Water is the most basic necessity. All it takes is a localized problem, a storm that disrupts municipal systems, a contamination event, a power outage affecting pumping stations, and panic buying ensues immediately. Bottled water shelves empty faster than shelves for any other product category, and not primarily due to panic, but genuine necessity. You cannot substitute for safe drinking water. You can find alternatives to most foods, but water has no alternative. Once bottled water is gone, the psychological and practical boundary between normal life and crisis mode becomes sharply visible. The speed at which water disappears and the length of time before supplies are restored tells you everything about local infrastructure resilience and supply chain responsiveness. In some areas, shelves restock within days. In others, water remains scarce for weeks. Pay attention to these patterns in your area because they predict how all other shortage scenarios will unfold. And finally, salt. It seems almost absurd to worry about salt. It's cheap, it's everywhere, it seems infinite. Every grocery store has an entire section dedicated to salt in various forms. How could salt possibly be vulnerable? But salt's ubiquity is precisely what makes people underestimate its critical importance. Salt isn't just about flavor, it's essential for preserving food, it's necessary for certain bodily functions, and historically it has been so strategic that civilizations have risen and fallen based on access to salt supplies. Salt production and distribution, while generally stable, still depend on mining operations, processing facilities, packaging, and transportation. During extreme disruptions, particularly those affecting infrastructure broadly, salt can become surprisingly difficult.
And once people recognize this, hoarding behavior emerges quickly. The absence of salt cripples your ability to preserve foods, which matters enormously if refrigeration becomes unreliable. It upends physical stability for people managing certain health conditions. And psychologically, discovering that even something as fundamental and taken for granted as salt has become scarce drives home the message that systems have truly broken down. The historical lesson here is clear. Salt is a quiet linchpin of food security.
It deserves a place in any reasonable preparedness planning, not out of fear or paranoia, but out of recognition that even the most basic commodities can become invaluable when stressed systems ripple outward. So what connects all 15 of these items? It's their dependence on systems: electricity, labor, transportation, refrigeration, global trade, stable agriculture, that are increasingly showing signs of fragility. For people whose daily lives depend on the stability and convenience of these staples, loss of availability isn't a minor inconvenience. It represents a loss of security, routine, health management capability, and peace of mind. But here's the critical insight. Shortages don't begin with empty shelves. They begin with shrinking choices, smaller packages, vanishing brands, and creeping prices. These are the signals you need to train yourself to recognize, because detecting them early allows you to prepare calmly and thoughtfully, rather than scrambling during a crisis. So what practical steps can you actually take? Start by becoming an observer of patterns. Pay attention when purchase limits appear on specific items. Notice when soft cheeses, fresh juices, or frozen dinners empty out after storms or power disruptions. These events are stress tests for your local supply chain, and they reveal which systems are most vulnerable in your area. Diversify your pantry thoughtfully. Don't wait for critical shortages to develop before you start building a modest reserve. Stock up mindfully on durable staples: UHT milk that doesn't require refrigeration, hard cheeses with long shelf lives, canned proteins that provide nutrition without cold storage, and yes, salt and cooking oils that enable food preparation and preservation. Practice rotation. Use the first in, first out principle for managing your reserves. Buy products, put them at the back of your pantry, and use the oldest items first. This keeps your stockpile fresh, prevents waste, and ensures you're always consuming food before it expires, while maintaining a buffer against disruption. Build community awareness. Share what you're noticing with friends, family, neighbors, or local community groups. Collective awareness helps everyone prepare more effectively without triggering panic. When multiple people are paying attention and sharing observations, you get a much clearer picture of what's actually happening versus what might be temporary or localized issues. And prioritize the true essentials. Don't underestimate basics like salt and cooking oil. Don't overlook the strategic value of canned proteins and shelf-stable dairy. These items often become truly invaluable when stressed systems create cascading effects that ripple through grocery stores. The goal isn't to hoard. It's not to panic. It's not to stockpile enough food for a zombie apocalypse. The goal is to prepare realistically based on observable patterns, to maintain enough of a buffer that temporary disruptions don't create crisis situations, and to preserve your ability to maintain your routines and health even when supply chains wobble. Modern grocery shortages unfold with subtlety rather than spectacle. The loss of choice precedes the appearance of empty shelves, and fragility in everyday foods points to broader vulnerabilities in the systems that sustain all of us. For older adults especially, the stability of meals and daily routines isn't trivial. It's foundational to health, independence, and basic quality of life. By watching for the earliest indicators, shrinking variety, quietly vanishing brands, subtle price increases, declining quality, you give yourself the gift of foresight. You don't need to panic. You don't need to clear shelves. You simply need to pay attention, prepare realistically, and adjust your approach as you see warning signs developing. This steady, informed approach helps ensure not just your own comfort and security, but contributes to the resilience of everyone who depends on those same grocery store shelves staying reasonably full. The rhythms of daily life may seem unshakable, but understanding their underlying fragility is the first essential step towards safeguarding them for yourself and for those who count on you. What have you noticed disappearing from your local stores? Are you seeing any of these warning signs in your area? Share your observations in the comments below. Your insights might help someone else prepare more effectively. If you found this information valuable, make sure you're subscribed to Food Decider so you don't miss our next video, where we'll be diving into how to build a genuinely resilient pantry without breaking the bank or sacrificing the foods you actually enjoy eating. Hit that like button, and I'll